In this video, the process of creating a SOLIDWORKS assembly will be shown. Open SOLIDWORKS and create a new assembly document. When a new assembly document is opened, a property manager appears, allowing you to browse for parts or assemblies to add to the assembly. Any open document will also appear in this property manager. Make sure, once the first component is in place, set the drafting standard, units, and precision under Options. When an initial component is selected, the cursor can be moved to the graphics window and the left mouse button can be clicked to place the component in the assembly. It is always a good idea to place it relative to the origin of the assembly. If the origin is not displayed when bringing in a new component, go under the Hide Show Items icon in the Heads Up View toolbar and select Origin. When bringing in a component, the cursor can be held over the origin and the origin of the component will snap to the origin of the assembly. When more components are added to an assembly, it may be desirable to hide the origins as it can become cluttered and confusing. The first component that is inserted into the assembly is fixed by default. This can be seen by the letter F next to the component name in the Feature Manager. By right-clicking the component name and selecting Float, this can be removed. Notice how there is now a minus sign next to the component name. This means that the component has at least 1 degree of freedom of movement. The absence of any symbol means that there are no free degrees of freedom. In other words, it is fixed. In an assembly, fix the first component to the origin or fully define it to the 3 default planes. Unlike in a sketch, it is okay to have components, however not the first one, that are underdefined, as this means that there are components in the assembly that can move. Additional components, whether they are parts or other assemblies, can be added to the current assembly by selecting Insert Components from the Assembly tab in the Command Manager. In order to place components in their desired location and orientation, degrees of freedom needs to be removed from each component. To remove degrees of freedom, mates need to be added. This can be done by clicking the Mate icon under the Assembly tab in the Command Manager. There are different types of mates that can be used to remove degrees of freedom from components. In the Mate Property Manager, the Entities to Mate box allows you to select the components to be mated. By right-clicking on one of the entities in that box, that entry can be deleted or the entire selection can be deleted if the wrong entities were chosen. The standard mates are the basic mates used to remove degrees of freedom from components. Under the advanced mates, more complex mates such as symmetric or path mates can be added. The mechanical mates are used to simulate actual mechanical hardware such as hinges or gears. When surfaces are selected, mates that cannot be used with the selected surfaces are grayed out. The Mate Alignment option is used when it is necessary to change the components to be mated from aligned to anti-aligned or vice versa. With the type of mate selected as well as the entities to be mated, the green checkmark can be selected. In the graphics window, 2 components can also be selected while holding the Control key, and a context toolbar will appear with applicable mates that can make creating assemblies easier. Smaller assemblies or subassemblies can be created and then put into another assembly to create a larger assembly. This is a good idea when the end model contains many parts. One thing to note is that if a subassembly is brought into another assembly, it will be in a rigid state. This means that if parts in the subassembly moved, they will no longer move unless the subassembly is put into a flexible state. This is done by right-clicking the subassembly in the Feature Manager and selecting the component properties in the menu. Then, the option Rigid or Flexible can be selected from under Solve As. When a model is complete, an exploded view can be created by selecting the Exploded View icon under the Assembly tab in the Command Manager. Here, components can be selected and then dragged or rotated with the triad and rotation rings to move them away from the rest of the components. Values for the distance and rotation can also be entered into the designated boxes in the Explode Property Manager. Steps are created each time a component is moved or rotated. To edit them, right-click the desired step and select Edit Step. Once complete, the green checkmark can be clicked and exploded lines can be added by clicking the exploded line sketch icon. Faces or edges can be selected to create lines that connect the components. This exploded view can then be shown when a drawing is created of that assembly. Just like when creating parts, try to utilize symmetry in the assembly. Utilize mirror components and component pattern to create multiple instances of the components. Reuse similar components with Save As Copy and configurations. When opening an assembly, all components that are contained in the assembly are needed. This can be a problem when emailing assembly if the assembly components are not sent as well. To keep all the components together, use the Pack and Go option, which can be found under File, to save an assembly or drawing document with all its references. The Pack and Go tool saves all the components to either a folder or creates a zip file to email.